Welcome, everybody. We're recording. It's so great to see you here today. Thank you so much for making it out to Trauma Training Tuesday. This is such a good crowd. We have already 40 people. So amazing. And it really speaks to the importance of this topic. So I'm super glad about that. I'm Amy Ebbison at Worcester Addresses Childhood Trauma. I have my colleague Kelsey Hopkins here, and we are thrilled to have the district attorney's office with us today. And they'll talk a little bit more, but I just want to say the DA's office has been such a big supporter of our work. If you're not speaking, if you could mute, that would be great. And other people have host privileges. You can, if you need to mute people, that would be great too. The DA's office has been such an incredible supporter of ours, helped us with events, do things in the past. And it's so wonderful to see all the initiatives coming out of the DA's office. And the Handle with Care initiative is exceptional. I think it's really the right things to do to help kids that are going through traumatic situations, that are struggling. And we do have a number of presenters, with Susanna being our main presenter. But I am going to start us off by turning it over to the lovely and talented Ellen Miller from DA Early's office. You will see what's so great about Ellen in a moment. But she is here to talk to us a little bit about the DA's role in this, and she's going to introduce our other speakers. So I am going to turn it over to Ellen and mute myself.
Great, thank you, Amy. My name is Ellen Miller. As I look around at all the squares, I think I'm familiar with almost everybody. I've been with DA's office for a really long time. You know, we're really lucky to work for DA Early, who has made prevention his top priority. That he always says he'd rather help prevent a crime than have to solve a crime. And over these past many years, we've really made this trauma focused. And whether that's, you know, I see a couple of the presenters in our office, like Hope and Julia, whether we're talking about building resiliency in children with bullying, cyber safety, healthy relationship programs, or we're working with our SIMS program. I don't know if people are familiar with the SIMS program that we have. It's Critical Incident Management Systems, which back when we first started it, every police chief within Worcester County signed on to participate in the program, and they enter overdoses as they get them in. So what happens is now we, additionally to just the SIMS program, we have a recovery coach grant. So there's a follow-up immediately with non-fatal overdoses. Through the past couple of years, we've been working with the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children, Handle with Care West Virginia, to try to implement these programs throughout Worcester County. Fortunately, you're going to hear from Renee Eldredge, possibly Selena Johnson from up North County, because you know they're really a great model at this Handle with Care collaborative and how they work together with the schools, the police, the hospital, and they'll explain more on that. And I do see DA Early on. I didn't know if DA Early wanted to introduce you or you'd like me to. And this past year, we've been lucky to have Sue join our team. And Susanne Bahnan will introduce herself a little too, but DA Early.
I just want to welcome everyone here. What Ellen said about the Drug Endangered Children Handle with Care program, they're awesome programs. And the more we learn about trauma, the more we learn the effects of trauma on these kids. It's amazing. We know that 40 to 60% of the kids, if we don't deal with the trauma, are going to be involved in the criminal justice system, and about 50% will also have substance use disorder. So we're really fortunate to get Sue Bahnan to join our team. And Ellen's come back in a supervisory role. We've got some great things going on. I just want to get a chance to say hi to everyone. I'm juggling a couple of things here. But Ellen, I'm going to hand it back to you to introduce Sue. But, you know, when we work together, it's a force multiplier. In really, the Drug Endangered Children's Conference that we just attended in Kansas City was amazing. When you open it up and share successes, get successes by stepping out of your silos, also stepping out of your silos, it's just a great thing. This is the type of thing that motivates me, makes it feel good to come to work every day. While we see some of the carnage and the tragedy in the criminal justice system, I've always been about prevention, and it's why I got this job. And when you know your why, your what becomes more impactful. And I'm lucky to have so many people around me. Ellen, Sue, I see Julie on this, Ashley, and I hope might be on it as well. But really working together, it really lets you not mind coming to work, help people and make, and make a half a buck doing it. It just it's a great recipe for success. So I wanted to say hi. It's great to see everyone here. I'm stepping into another meeting. Sue and Ellen, why don't you give Sue a little bit better introduction than that? And I'm just kidding. Ellen. And great to see all you guys. And thanks for being here for the training.
Thank you, dearly. Yay.
All right, Sandy. Good to see everyone. All right, got a lot of friends here. Thanks, guys.
So now it's time to introduce Sue Bahnan. I've tried to change how I introduce Sue, because sometimes I embarrass her, but she is definitely our in-house expert on trauma and learning, just ways that it affects the body. I don't want to say too much. Sue, I'll give it right over to you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Dee, Early. It's such an honor to be here. All of these different initiatives, all these different programs that are really child-focused are so, so important. And I think it was the Dalai Lama that said the quickest way to change the world is to work with the kids. And so we have all different layers of programs that, of course, help adults. But really, when we can dial in on the environments and the relationships that we're building for and with children, I really think that we'll see such a rapid shift in our world. So I'm going to jump right in. My background was listed on on the write-up, so you can certainly read that. But just so that we can stay on time here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the nervous system's response to trauma and how we can handle with care. I'm just going to do a real quick overview here. We're going to take a look at the ACE study. Many of you have heard about the ACE study already, but we'll just do a dive into that. And then we're going to look through a new lens at what trauma is. And this lens is called the polyvagal theory. This is really cutting edge science. And even though neuroscience is my primary background, I'm actually not going to be focusing on the brain. I'm going to be focusing on the autonomic nervous system today. And really, because that's the source, that's where our responses to trauma really originate. And in all the different elements of who we are, including our behaviors, emerge from. Then we'll talk about toxic stress, trauma specifically. Then we'll also look at attachment theory in relationships, trauma's impact on learning, and we will finish with the handle with care initiative. So I wanted to start this off because trauma can be a pretty heavy topic. So I wanted to actually, at first I want to try to, can't you hide this little panel thing? Hide floating. Yes. Okay. All right. So this can be a bit of a heavy topic. So I really wanted to start off by saying that this is a story about connection. We as human beings are biologically wired for connection. Even if at some point as an adult, you've developed a story in your psyche that you don't need connection, your nervous system is continuously wired for, waiting for, and wishing for connection until our dying day. And it is in connection that we develop the protective factors of resilience that protect us from stress and from trauma. The other thing I want to bring up is this very natural cycle called reciprocity, rupture, and repair. And it's in our human imperfections that we actually have the opportunity to grow stronger, both individually and collectively. So this is not about doing things perfectly and getting things right all the time. In fact, when we don't do things perfectly, that's actually what's led our human species to evolve into such strong beings at this point. So, you know, the power of one, there's been research that shows that even just one healthy relationship can change a child's life. And that is also true for us adults. So as you listen to this and you think about the various children that you work with, I want you to also think about yourself and the different experiences that you've had in your life. Okay. So the ACE study, this was a 1998 Kaiser Permanente and CDC study done in San Diego, California. What they did is that they sent out a survey to about 17,000 participants. The survey was both 10 questions around these 10 categories that they referred to as adverse childhood experiences, as well as a very lengthy female-specific and male-specific health background survey. And what they ended up finding was that there was a very strong correlation between the health outcomes that these different adults reported and the adverse experiences that they reported experiencing when they were younger. The way that the ACE study worked is that every time you did experience one of those ACEs, it was a score of 1, and then you would add up your score at the end. And it's important to note here that this was a pretty affluent demographic of people, 75% white, roughly half male, half female. And overall, about 75% of them had gone on to enroll in some college or graduate level schooling. And so these specific categories that they looked at were across 3 different types: abuse, which consisted of physical, emotional, and sexual; neglect, which consisted of physical and emotional; and also something that they called household dysfunction, which asked about mental illness in the home, an incarcerated relative, witnessing your mother being treated violently, substance use, and also divorce or separation from their parent. And so what they found was about 2/3 of these participants experienced at least one ACE. And that's pretty substantial. It showed us just how prevalent trauma is in the general population. And when we look at the top 3 most reported, it was physical abuse, household substance use, and parental divorce. So again, this really shows us just how prevalent trauma is in our general populations. What they were also able to see is that a high ACE score was impacting all aspects of a person's life: physical health, mental health, academic achievement, quality of relationships, workforce productivity, and earning potential. And they saw that the more ACEs that someone experienced, the more negative impact was seen in these various areas. What were these increased risk outcomes that they saw? So they saw that childhood trauma promoted a whole onset of different chronic diseases, anxiety, depression, various mental illnesses, substance use, leading to addiction, violence, and being the victim of violence, as well as financial and social problems. And so we can see a whole list of these here, everything from stroke to COPD, obesity, diabetes, substance use, smoking, lack of physical activity, so on and so forth. And the numbers were pretty staggering as well. So they were able to see that for the adults that had experienced 4 or more ACEs, there was a drastic increase in the chances of developing or falling into these different risk behaviors. So heart disease increased by 220%, cancer by 190%. Diabetes increased, the likelihood increased by 160%, depression 460%. The likelihood someone that could become a smoker increased by 220%. To use illicit drugs, 470%. To inject drugs intravenously increased by 1,030%. the likelihood that one could engage in risk behaviors and contract a sexually transmitted disease increased by 250, and then the attempt of suicide or suicide ideation increased by 1,220%. And also very scary outcome was seeing that those that experienced 6 or more had a decrease in their life expectancy by almost 20 years. There was then an additional study done by a group in Philadelphia that looked at this expanded ACE study, so the typical 10 questions plus a few more, to explore the prevalence of trauma in more urban areas, because they saw that the demographic originally looked at was quite specific. So they added questions around witnessing violence, feeling discriminated against, various adverse neighborhood experiences, being bullied, and living in foster care. And when the two of these studies were combined, it was actually shown that over 80% of people in the general population had experienced at least one ACE. And of course, these types of staggering numbers show us that trauma absolutely needs to be a priority to us, and preventing trauma absolutely needs to be a priority. This is just a slide that shows really the whole breadth of different adverse childhood experiences that could end up being traumatic for individuals. We touched on some household ones. Some additional community ACEs could include poverty, lack of social capital and mobility, poor water supply, poor housing, and then of course environmentals. And we've seen different elements of natural disaster events happening all around the world. Volcanoes, fires, earthquakes, so on and so forth. And this pyramid here really just shows the compounding effects of different trauma that can happen on various levels. So here at the bottom, we see generational trauma. So this could be, you know, if your parents were involved in a famine or a genocide or war. Then you have social contexts. Again, we kind of just touched on different local context in your outside environment. That could also include, you know, working by a power plant and different types of chemical oriented pathogens that can be introduced into your lifestyle. Then we have our adverse childhood experiences, which then goes on to disrupt neurodevelopment. And as a result of disrupted neurodevelopment, we see impairments in social, emotional, and cognitive function. Then from that, we can see adoption of different health risks behaviorally, often used to cope with the deficiencies in one's neuro and cognitive and social emotional development, then leading to a onset of disease, disability, and different social problems, and possibly and often resulting in early death. So what happens in the brain and body when a child experiences ACEs? And here's the, we're going to now stroll down the lane of polyvagal theory. So first and foremost, we're just going to start with a very brief introduction of the autonomic nervous system, kind of like your typical 101 biology class. And we were taught traditionally that there are two branches of our autonomic nervous system. We have our parasympathetic and we have our sympathetic. And all in all, our autonomic nervous system is in charge of operating all of the automatic functions that occur in our body. So breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, hormonal flow. You have to go to the bathroom. Your eyes are lubricated so you can blink. All these different things that luckily we don't have to think about and then can happen so that we are functioning humans moving through the world. And a really simple way to cognize these two different branches is that our parasympathetic is our brake pedal. This is what allows us to slow down when we need to, so that we can rest after a long day, so that we can digest our food, so that we can repair tissue in our sleep. And then we have our sympathetic nervous system, and you can think of this as our gas pedal. So when we need to rise to an occasion, our sympathetic nervous system allows us to experience that burst of energy. It is also very pivotal in moments of survival. If you're going to cross the street, a car is about to, drive in front of you, your sympathetic nervous system will activate and move you out of the way. And oftentimes, as I said, this doesn't actually involve the thinking brain. the autonomic nervous system is a brain in and of itself, and it often makes these decisions without your cognitive input. So we have a brake pedal that lets us slow down. We have a gas pedal that lets us speed up. And both of these elements is what allows us to be the highly functioning humans that we are. However, polyvagal theory is actually an updated map of the autonomic nervous system. And instead of just 2 pathways, it actually shows us that there are 3 distinct pathways of the autonomic nervous system. And it shows that the autonomic nervous system is hierarchically activated based on the detection of safety, danger, or threat, inside, outside, and between. So inside your body, outside in the environment, and between other people. And really what this incredible new theory shows is that it highlights the relationship between the autonomic nervous system and social behavior. And it really affirms that human development and well-being is actually social in nature. And so it expands our understanding of the 2 roles of the vagus nerve. So yes, we know that homeostatic control is something that the vagus nerve is in charge of, monitoring our internal organs and regulating our different automatic functioning as needed. But there's also a secondary, very important role that most of us aren't even aware of, and that is shifting between autonomic states. So it is the autonomic nervous system, and specifically the vagus nerve, that allows us to shift into a survival mode when needed, but then also allows us to shift out of it and back into states of regulation and connection as needed. And this is on a moment-to-moment basis. And what we end up seeing in the world is that suffering ends up happening, disease ends up happening when we cannot shift out of that survival state back into a state of regulation and connection. And when we are starved of regulation and connection, we not only physically break down, as we are not actually designed to be in a state of stress for decades, and we also emotionally and psychologically begin to break down as well. So again, why learn about the autonomic nervous system and this polyvagal theory? Well, we can look at behavior, which is really what we've been doing for many years now. We tend to operate on a behavioral model. However, and it's funny, I'm not even going to be talking so much about brain scan studies and different things like that, because as it turns out, the autonomic nervous system in the body is the most upstream point of initiatory activity within our human organism. We often think the brain is in charge, but actually it's between the pathways of communication between brain and body. 80% of those pathways are from the body up to the brain, and only 20% of those pathways are from the brain back down to the body, often in a motor control type output. But most of it is sensory information coming up from the body to the brain. And it is from there that all other elements of our subjective experience become available. So all sensations, feelings, emotions, thoughts, beliefs, and all stories about ourselves, about other people, and about the world that we create in our minds emerge out of our autonomic state. So state creates story, and that's something that you can keep in mind as we move forward. So let's take a look at these 3 distinct states. So again, we have our sympathetic nervous system here on the right, and we have our parasympathetic here on the left. And it is the vagus nerve of our parasympathetic that actually has 2 distinct pathways in it. So instead of just thinking of the vagus nerve as a cord that's singular, think of it more as a fiber optic cable that has multiple different cords within it. And so we have a ventral vagal system, which you can see here on this model in green. We have a dorsal vagal system, which you can see on this model in red. And we have a sympathetic nervous system, which is a spinal nervous system, and that's here in yellow. So let's take a look at our ventral vagal, what is often called our social engagement system. So this system is our face-heart connection, and it unites the autonomic nerves of the face, the ears, the voice, the heart, and the lungs. And through this system, we project our emotions and our physiological states on our face and through our voice. You know, those moments where you can't really hide how you're feeling? That's because of our ventral vagal system. We then have our dorsal vagal system, which is immobilization and shutdown. And again, this is our internal brake system. And this system unites the autonomic nerves of the heart and internal organs and the gut. And it's through this system that we regulate the function and rate of our digestion. We also modulate different pain levels and thresholds, and we modulate consciousness levels as well. And then we have our sympathetic, our mobilization / defense nervous system, our internal gas pedal. This unites the autonomic nerves of the heart, lungs, and skeletal muscles. And it's through this system that we activate and energize ourselves through increased arousal, alertness, and movement. And so we can take a moment, actually. I invite you to take your left hand and you can place it right on the bottom of your skull at the very top of your neck. And that is where your brainstem is. And then you can take your right hand and just start on the side of your neck. And that's actually where your vagus nerve is. And then you can bring your hand down and place it right on top of your heart. And this is your ventral vagal system. It connects all of the muscles of the face, ear, and voice with your heart and your lungs. And then you can let your hand come all the way down and just sit on top of your belly, right over your gut. And this is your dorsal vagal system. And again, it allows you to digest your food and allows you to relax when needed. And then you can let your hands relax and you can gently put your left hand or right, whatever feels most comfortable for you, behind your back and reach your hand up towards your shoulder blades. And then take your other hand and reach down over your shoulder blades. And right where the space between your hands, that's generally where your sympathetic nerves exit your spine. So now you just had a nice, brief embodied experience of where these nerves live in your body. Okay, so there's some organizing principles of polyvagal theory, and they're very, very important. So I just want to take a moment to cover these. So first and foremost is neuroception. And this is the neural or autonomic detection of safety and or threat, again, inside, outside, and between. And it's really important to know that this is detection without awareness. Your autonomic nervous system, regardless of what your cognitive mind is focusing on or playing or creating at the time, is always 24/7 scanning the inside of your body, the environment in which you are in, and the other people that surround you every single moment. And it is looking for cues of safety or cues of threat so that it can make a decision, again, without your cognitive input, to save your life in that moment. Your survival is of the utmost importance. So this neuroception happens beneath conscious awareness. And again, makes autonomic decisions without your choice based on the cues it detects. Because if you had to think about saving your life, our ancestors probably would not have lived as often as they did. It's because the body can act on its own that we're able to make really snapshot movements that can get us away from danger. Then we have something called co-regulation. And co-regulation is, again, the cues of safety and threat sent from one nervous system to another, from one autonomic nervous system to another autonomic nervous system. And this is the foundation of autonomic regulation. And it is really a biological imperative. The human infant is not actually born with full capacity to self-regulate. And it's through its relationship to its mother and its father or its caregivers in general that it is able to receive regulation of its own system as it begins to build the wiring of self-regulation over time. And it is through that relationship that children are able to lay down the wiring for self-regulation, which is why we see when there's an absence or there's neglect or abuse within the caregiver relationship, that it drastically impairs the neurodevelopment that is naturally occurring and ultimately the self-regulation that that child can then go on to employ as they move through the world. So again, developmentally, co-regulation happens before self-regulation, and even after gaining self-regulation skills, there's a lifelong need for co-regulation. Again, we're wired for connection. We are wired to be in connection and communion with each other. And lastly is the autonomic hierarchy. So the ANS actually works in a predictable hierarchy, and we'll explore more of this next. And this gives rise to what Dr. Porges, who's the founder of polyvagal theory, calls neural platforms of behavior. You can think of neural platforms of behavior as like, this is the stage at which your autonomic nervous system is currently standing on. And based on that, these types of feelings, emotions, thoughts, behaviors are accessible to you. Certain ones are not. And then if you shift, the accessibility shifts along with it. And it really colors our world. Depending on the autonomic state we're in, changes our physiology, changes what we feel, how we think, how we experience ourselves, how we perceive and interpret the world around us, and again, the behaviors that are available to us. So let's just take a little brief moment and look at the evolution of the autonomic nervous system, because I think this is really important. Sometimes we can often say, oh, I did that thing again. Like, why did I do that? Or if you're working with children, it's like, I just told you not to do that, and yet you're doing it again. Well, these parts of our nervous system are incredibly old. So the dorsal parasympathetic nervous system actually came into being 500 million years ago. And at that time, that organism, its adaptive protective behavior was through disappearing and immobilizing. That was how it protected itself. It was the only way that it could at that point in evolution. Then our sympathetic nervous system came into being 100 million years later, so 400 million years ago from today. And that organism was able to spring into action. So movement became available for the very first time as a survival strategy. And it wasn't until 200 million years ago, through the evolution of mammals, that the ventral parasympathetic came into being. And that was when we really became social creatures. And so health, growth, and restoration became a way of not just surviving, but thriving and building. And individual and social regulation was now a survival strategy that was available. And we can see this here in this little brief timeline here. You can see the old vagus nerve existed in what was called a plactoderm, very poor eyesight of a fish. So slowing metabolic rate and being still, you were undetectable. And then here in an Acanthodian, this is the first vertebrate known with a fully developed jawbone, was able to swim away or fight as a way to protect itself. And it's not until here, around 200 million years ago, that mammals came into evolution. And so this new ventral vagal nerve is uniquely mammalian. Okay, so the autonomic hierarchy. So now let's just take a look at these three different autonomic states and how they sort of stack on top of each other. So our social engagement system is what is online when we feel safe. And the goal of this system is relaxation, connection, and engagement with others. It also doesn't mean that the sympathetic and dorsal vagal are offline. Rather, it's able to regulate. So you can think of it as the ventral vagal system is overseeing the rest of the nervous system. So the sympathetic means that, is able to give us energy as we need it. Dorsal is able to digest our food as we need it. And overall, we have this balanced sense of health. When the sympathetic mobilization is dominant, that means that we have detected a sense of danger. And the goal here is energizing activation so that we can defend ourselves and self-protect through fighting, running, or freezing. And then we have immobilization here at the bottom, and that is when our neuroception detects life threat. And the goal of this system is energy conservation and numbness from pain too intense to cope with. And in fact, endorphins are released to numb physical and emotional pain. So when a stressor becomes too overwhelming and our ventral vagal system's no longer able to oversee everything, we devolve, if you will, to a sympathetic state. We use fighting and fleeing as a way to diffuse a threat. If that is not successful, we devolve yet again into our dorsal vagal. And this means that it's the threat is insurmountable, perhaps beyond what we're able to deal with in the moment. And we then go into a collapse and a shutdown as our final survival strategy. Maybe if I'm motionless, the predator will keep moving and I can run away when it's safe. And again, our social engagement system is energy balancing. The sympathetic mobilizing system is energy demanding, very metabolically costly. and our dorsal vagal immobilization is energy conserving. So it'll shut down the system. And one more thing to mention before we move on is the vagal brake. So the vagal brake actually forms a connection between our brainstem and the SA node of the heart, which is our heart's pacemaker. And it's through this system that our heart rate is regulated. So you can think of it as the brakes on a bicycle when you're going down a hill. So when you release the brake, you speed up, and then that can give us more energy to meet a challenge. When you re-engage the brake, our heart rate slows down and we can return to homeostasis. And this is really what allows a mammal to engage in both mobilizing and immobilizing states without fear. And it's because of this sophisticated brake in our vagus nerve that gives us a whole breadth and range of different states, from calm to passionate, creative, and alert, all still while regulated under our ventral vagal system. So it's not that we can't be activated and regulated at the same time. The vagal brake is what makes that possible. So let's take a look now at these neural platforms of behavior and what they might look like in a child. So there are 4 pure, or we can think of it more as dominant states. Pure kind of implies that it's only one, it's homogeneous, and that's the term that Dr. Porges uses. But I like the term dominant in the sense that it's just the one that's the loudest of the 3. So we have our social engagement system. And again, this is when we're able to socialize. We feel safe enough to connect with other people. And because we're able to open in that way, we can feel creative, we can feel compassionate, we can rise to meet any task, even if it's something that might take some energy from us. We have a sense that it's possible to figure it out. We become resourceful, and our heart rate and muscle tone are generally normal. And then we have our sympathetic here in the middle. We have fight and we have flight. So fight exists on the emotional continuum of anger. So you can feel irritation, you can feel rage, you can feel angry. Flight tends to exist on the emotional continuum of fear, so worry, anxiety, or even terror. And in this state, we have increased heart rate, blood pressure, and hormonal flow, and generally an increase in muscle tone. And then lastly, we have shutdown here. And you can kind of see in this child's eyes, he's not really here anymore, right? And shutdown tends to exist on a continuum of dissociation. So absent-mindedness, zoning out, dissociation, really when it gets to quite extreme, it can be depersonalization. And you can even lose consciousness altogether and pass out. So you have very low heart rate. Your muscle tone is also very low, and you tend to have very low energy. So next we have something called hybrid states. And Stephen Porges says, in his work that there's 3 hybrid states. There's a lot of other research coming out to say that we have actually far more distinct hybrid states than that, but we'll just start here. So on the far left, we can see intimacy. So this, again, the ventral vagal system is overseeing everything, but the dorsal immobilization is also present. This allows us to conform our bodies with another. We can hug, we can snuggle. We can also on our own meditate, relax, read a book. And this is really what allows us to connect with people in physically intimate and emotionally intimate ways as well. And again, while immobilization tend to be experienced as only a survival state with fear, the ventral vagal system allows us to engage in immobilization without fear. So then we have a mixture of ventral and sympathetic, and this is really an interesting space. And for kids, I would say that this is where learning and play come in. So you have just enough sympathetic energy where you are energized and you are invigorated. You can move your body in play and sport and performance. But again, that ventral vagal system is overseeing it all, and it enables us to be social and to move, and we feel active and playful and motivated. Again, and if that ventral vagal system is not able to hold regulation, play can devolve into competition and conflict. And lastly, here on the right, we have freeze. And this is really the only survival strategy that's currently on the screen. And this is when we have a mixture of immobilization and mobilization. So that moment where you want to move, but you just can't move, and your muscles are really tight, you're kind of like that deer frozen in headlights. That's what freeze is. Sympathetic activation, your heart is beating out of your chest, but immobilization, your muscles are frozen and you're not moving anywhere. And that tends to be a place of fear or possibly terror. There is one more hybrid state that I wanted to include here, though, and that is fawn. I don't know if anyone is familiar with fawn, but this is when you're in a sympathetic survival response, but uniquely, you employ your social engagement system as a way to appease the threat in front of you. So you try to disarm the threat by appeasing to it and meeting its needs. Evolutionarily speaking, they say that this probably evolved in women because running was not a good survival response because the offspring were left behind or were too heavy to carry. Fighting was probably not a good response because she would have been overpowered. And so the best way to diffuse in the moment was to appease to the partner, meet the needs of the partner so that they hopefully were not as mad and therefore threatening. And that's something that, of course, men, male-bodied people use as well, certainly not just only women. And I think we probably see a lot of this in our modern world where we're not necessarily fighting and fleeing as much as our ancestors. So here we just have a full visual. We have our dominant or pure states here at the top, and we have our hybrid states here at the bottom. Just wanted you to take a moment to then look at the mapping of our colored vagal and sympathetic autonomic systems here on the right. So next, let's talk about, so how do we even send cues of safety and threat? So the first way is verbally. We can use words, but that's pretty much it. Most of the cues of safety and threat we send non-verbally. And that means through our eyes, through our facial expression, through our tone of voice, through grunts and vocal sounds, through head movement, posture, gesture, intensity, and timing. So we often hear, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, that's scientifically based in autonomic science. And it literally is not about what you say because your nervous system is not going to hide if you're sympathetically activated. So if you say fine, another person's nervous system is going to be like, okay, they said fine, but they're clearly not fine, or whatever it might be. And I'm sure everyone in this virtual room knows what I'm talking about. But this is incredibly important because when it comes to working with children, it doesn't actually have to be complex interventions, although there's absolutely a need for that. Oftentimes, it's really just how you look at them, the way in which you move in front of them, hold your body when you speak to them, the softness or the harshness of your voice. There was a story that Joe Restucci told of a young boy who couldn't pay attention in class because he heard this rumbling noise off in the distance. And actually, one of the unique elements of the ventral vagal system is that it relaxes our inner ear muscle, and it allows us to hear higher frequency tones, which are more resonant with human voices. When we are in a sympathetic or immobilized danger or life threat, our inner ear tightens and only picks up lower level frequencies. And typically that had to do with, these big mammoth and other massive predators, back in the day. And so he could hear a tractor out in the parking lot doing some construction. So he was very clearly in a survival state. His ear could not pick up the human voices in the room. It was quite literally tuned to a different frequency. So again, I just really want to bring this forward because there's somewhat of a myth in terms of how willful and intentional a lot of our behaviors are, especially in young children. And really, actually, our autonomic nervous system is the one driving the boat. So it can really help us understand the behaviors that we might see, not just in the classroom, but also just out in the world in general. So I'm going to do a quick exercise here of just putting some faces up on the screen. And I'd like you to just pay attention to what your neuroception tells you about these nonverbal signs that you're receiving. So did you notice any difference in the way that your autonomic nervous system reacted, even if it was very small, to these different facial expressions? And then it can kind of become clear to you like, oh, wow, you know, even though I can logically tell myself this is a 2D picture on a screen, I actually felt my heart rate increase for a moment, or wow, I felt my heart rate relax for just a moment. Okay. So let's take a look at toxic stress. So stress is a natural part of life. It's a healthy part of life that allows us to meet challenges, build strength, and build resilience. And when a child has a co-regulating parent and they have that support system in place, children can learn to manage and adapt to stress, can ultimately build those self-regulation skills and become resilient over time. And again, reciprocity, rupture, repair. Healthy relationships undergo natural cycles of conflict and restoration. But toxic stress occurs when children live in a perpetual state of survival with no consistent parental support or no successful successful repairs to ruptures. And ultimately, the stress response and those survival systems never turn off. So if we really think of an unfortunate experience of a child being at home who has a neglectful parent and who has an abusive parent, and you know, I also don't want to leave out the non-extreme. You know, there can be parents who are physically present, but emotionally nowhere to be found. So this type of toxic stress and adverse experience can come in many different packages. It's not only the extreme versions, but of course they are the ones that are most vulnerable and that need the most support. Let's take a quick look now at the brain. So there's three areas that I'm just going to look at quickly right now. One is our prefrontal cortex right behind our forehead. One is the amygdala, two almond-shaped organs in our limbic system, about a couple inches in from our ears, and then attached to each amygdala is our hippocampus. So our prefrontal cortex you can think of as our control system. And it's also the seat of our unique self. So it helps us refine all these different things. Should I say that? No, I shouldn't. You know, if I do this, what would happen later? Problem solving, decision making, emotional regulation, what is appropriate or not. So social behavior and impulse control, and also empathy and compassion. And it helps us solve problems in school and think of abstract concepts. Our amygdala tends to get a bad rap. We tend to think of the amygdala as the fear center of the brain. And although that's certainly true, it's important to know that the amygdala actually tags importance of the different things in our experience. It's something called salience. So let's say that you're walking down a street and you go into an alleyway and you get mugged. Now, as you move forward, your brain has tagged alleyways. There is significant importance that holds for you. Whereas if someone has never been mugged in an alleyway, the amygdala will not tag that as important. So based on our experiences, we can also, you know, if we have experiences of warm chocolate chip cookies when we go to grandma's house, that's another tagging of importance. Every time you smell chocolate chip cookies, it means something to you. So that's also something that the amygdala does. It plays a role in emotional memory, and it helps us to consolidate emotional memory. But yes, it also detects danger and threat in our environment, and it activates the response of survival as needed. And then our hippocampal system is our memory encoding system. And this is not just emotional memory, it's also temporal memory, like when did it happen in time, spatial memory, where did it happen in space? And of course, this helps us learn in the classroom. So let's say we pick up a cue of danger in our environment and the amygdala starts to siren. One of the first things that will happen is that it'll trigger our adrenal glands to release both adrenaline, which increases our heart rate, and cortisol, which does a number of things, including heightening our senses, meant to be only in the short term, and gives us different fuel. Let's say it breaks down fuel from our liver so that we can meet this demand. Now, at first, like I just mentioned, this does it does make our senses very acute. We're able to hear, see, and move in ways that we maybe couldn't just a moment ago without all that mobilizing energy. But over time, prolonged stress, cortisol will build up in both the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, both of which are highly susceptible to cortisol in large quantities. And as a result, our prefrontal cortex will shut down, and so will our hippocampus. And this is why when you're in an argument, you knew what to say, you rehearsed it beforehand, but it just didn't come to you in the moment. It's because this prefrontal cortex and hippocampus is shut down. It's also why when we really reach that moment, we flip our lid, as Dan Siegel likes to say, and the wires that connect our prefrontal cortex to our limbic system and tell our limbic system to calm down as needed, that goes offline. So now we're just in this pure reactionary emotional limbic state. And, you know, these are two very important areas. Also, as it pertains to the criminal justice system, can often be why victims are not able to really recall things in perfect temporal or spatial manner, because these are highly disrupted by cortisol, and oftentimes a memory will become fragmented as a result. And this is just a brief look at how stress hormones also affect everything else inside your body. And we can really begin to see when we look at this picture, of course, adverse childhood experiences is going to turn into and increase the risks of negative health outcomes later in life. It diminishes our immune system. It diminishes our eyesight, our bone density. We experience more migraines and headaches. Our metabolism is all dysregulated, as we've now learned, because of our dorsal vagal system being completely disrupted, and the stress on our heart, blood glucose and fatty acid levels increase. So again, we can see here how negative health outcomes can be a product of ongoing childhood adverse experience. So now that we've taken a look at the autonomic nervous system in this new way, I wanted to wait to define trauma, because we just took in a lot of new information. And whereas before it maybe wouldn't have really clicked in, now we have a really good understanding of like, oh, that's why that happens. The nervous system responds in that way. So one way of defining trauma is too much, too fast, too soon, for too long. Too much, too fast can often mean, you know, this was a sudden experience, could even be something like a car accident. Too soon often means it was too early in that child's development. They didn't really have the regulation neural architecture laid down. And for too long means even something seemingly small, or if it was, of course, a complex trauma issue of abuse, neglect of any kind, it happening over the long term can really break a person down. So trauma can be thought of as an autonomic response of self-protection. So it actually is inherently trying to protect us to a single event or series of events, but it overwhelms our ability to cope and therefore integrate the experience in a way that is healthy. It can be an acute single event. It can be a chronic series of events over time. And it can also be complex, which means that the traumas are often interrelational with people that are caregivers that were meant to be protected by during childhood and adolescence. And this inability to cope and integrate interferes with one's ability to experience safety, connection, trust, and emotional stability, which is really the source of our health and restoration over the long term. Another way we can look at and define trauma is now through this lens of connection. So Stephen Porges says trauma is a chronic disruption of connection. Bruce Perry says the most traumatic aspects of all disasters involve the shattering of human connection. So since connection is a biological imperative, chronic disconnection is inherently traumatic. And disconnection happens when co-regulation opportunities with a caregiver are either unavailable entirely, completely unpredictable, or just flat out dangerous. And without that supportive co-regulation, children then enter that protection and survival mode, and they sever their connections with not only their caretakers, but with their environment and also with themselves, which has a lot of implication in terms of those negative health outcomes later in life. And when the autonomic nervous system has been shaped by trauma, self-regulation becomes biased towards protection and survival rather than connection and social engagement. So telling someone to relax is actually threatening, because their sense of familiarity, where their autonomic nervous system has anchored what is familiar on the daily is being active and being self-protective in defense mode. So telling someone or a child to just lay down their defenses because you're a safe person, although you may be, is absolutely not what their nervous system has come to know as non-threatening or non-dangerous, because vulnerability is often one of the reasons that many children can then experience danger and threat from a caregiver. So that vulnerability shuts down, that connection and social engagement systems shut down, and therefore to engage in those elements of human interaction become inherently dangerous themselves. So, as I was just sort of touching on, trauma, you can also define trauma as being stuck in an autonomic survival pattern. And while we certainly move through these survival patterns throughout the day, we tend to have a dominant way of the way we handle danger and threat that developed when we were younger. So some people tend to be more stuck in a sympathetic mobilization. And in this state, safety and co-regulation feels unfamiliar and unsustainable. Social connection and intimacy feel unsafe and dangerous. And although you may be able to experience brief moments of safety and co-regulation, your system can handle that and is like, okay, better to protect now. That was enough of that, and goes back to sympathetic activation. So it's this sort of endless cycle of distress, brief connection, distress. And then some of us also tend to have a more dominant survival pattern of mobilization or shutdown. So in this pattern, safety and connection feels unfamiliar and unsustainable. Social connection and sympathetic mobilization feels unsafe and dangerous. And the child or adult does not have enough resources to safely engage with sympathetic energy. It's like, you know, a fire hose, if you will, of energy. So the system tends to stay in this shutdown state. So that cycle is of disconnect, brief moments of distress or brief moments of connection, and then back to disconnect. So in this sense, we can think of trauma as a disconnection in time. So cues in our environment that even remotely resemble past experiences or are in fact neutral altogether, because the nervous system's so primed to be on alert because it lived in a dangerous environment for so long, it can send us right back to those unresolved moments of threat and survival pattern from the past that are unresolved. And then we get stuck in this threatening past that we project onto our present life experience rather than actually living in the present moment itself. So let's take a very brief look at what moving through these different systems might look like in real time. So let's say that you are, little Johnny is engaging in class, and his classmates are smiling. You can see the picture up there in the corner and playfully engaging. Everything's going well. And then Johnny's classmate says a mean comment to him and gives him this look. And suddenly, Johnny's autonomic neuroception perceives her tone of voice and facial expression as threatening, and boom, Johnny goes into a sympathetic survival pattern. So that vagal brake has released, and now he is very mobilized. And their play devolves into competition and conflict. And when class moves on to spelling or math, Johnny is completely dysregulated and he can't focus. He's not creative and he's not able to engage and learn as well. And now let's say that the class goes out to recess and Johnny is trying to maybe burn off some of that sympathetic energy on the playground. And suddenly another classmate of his yells at him to get off the swing, gives him that look. Johnny's neuroception perceives his tone of voice and facial expression as life-threatening, and boom, he's now in a shutdown state. And for the rest of the day, he sort of disappears into the crowd. He no longer makes eye contact with anyone. He feels the sense of hopelessness or helplessness, shame, and loneliness. He isn't able to complete any of his work for the rest of the day, and his tummy starts to hurt. And to really, again, drive home this sense of like, it colors our world. I just wanted to now move back up the hierarchy, starting at dorsal, and again, showing you what some different thoughts might come through someone's mind. So this sort of redness, just as a way to visually portray our system going into dorsal vagal. The world is unwelcoming. The child is disengaged. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on. Don't look at me. I don't want to make eye contact. Very low energy. Nobody cares. No one's coming. Very sleepy. They feel left behind, and they have a tummy ache. So now let's say we're moving back up the hierarchy into sympathetic. Here we can see this yellow has now colored our world. The world is dangerous. So now this is more energized and activated. Can't focus on their work. They're afraid or worried. They're confrontational. Like, what are you looking at? Don't look at me like that. They have more energy than they want sitting in a classroom. They feel misunderstood. You don't get it. They're fidgety. They can't sit still. They're restless. They're like, whoa, I'm out of control. I can't really control myself right now. And their palms are sweaty, or they're sweating from their armpits. And now let's return to the regulation and restoration of the ventral vagal. The world is full of possibility. I'm engaged in my work. I'm okay. Maybe it doesn't have to be rainbows and sunshine, but I'm okay. Let's work together. I want to engage and connect with others. My energy is balanced. Both my sympathetic and dorsal are doing what they need to do in the background. I feel supported by the people in my life and the people around me. I'm creative. I can actually think outside the box, let alone just do what's in front of me. And I'm having fun. I'm enjoying this, and I'm relaxed. So you can really feel the difference in the energy of all of these different states, and the ways that it both limits us and also expands us depending on where we are in our autonomic system. So next, I just want to look at attachment theory, because now, with the polyvagal work, we looked at the autonomic nervous system on a neural level. And now let's go downstream just a little bit into the psyche and how the relationships that we have with our early caregivers then end up building those stories, right? From the beginning, we said state creates story. Now let's look at the construction of those stories based on our attachment in early life. So James Bowlby was the first to create this area of psychology, and he stated that attachment relationships are biological predispositions evolved to ensure mammalian survival. So infants that were born, unlike other mammals, like if you've seen a horse being born, come out of the womb and a few minutes later, they're galloping with the herd. We are the most dependent mammal after we come into the world, and we cannot survive without our caregivers. And so infants require caregivers for survival and development, and the human infant has two fundamental needs. One is attachment, which is the connection to the caregiver. Why? Because they cannot regulate their own nervous system. They need the co-regulatory cues from the caregiver in order to regulate their system, and also they need to be fed and changed in order to survive. The other fundamental need is authenticity, and that's connection to self. And I don't just mean this in the sense of like, I'm going to authentically express. This also has to do with the authentic neuroception that your autonomic nervous system picks up. So basic needs. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. Gut feelings. I don't think this is safe. Survival instincts, when your nervous system is trying to get you to jump out of the way of something. So when we go through trauma, we cut off our connection to our authenticity, and that includes the basic survival detection mechanisms that allow us to either stay in a situation or leave a certain situation based on the danger or the potential further down the road outcomes. And Dr. Gabor Mate, another scientist that I absolutely love, says a baby that is not picked up will die. even if you feed the baby well, because the baby will become overwhelmed by its own emotions. The baby needs the brain and nervous system of the parent to co-regulate its own internal state. So moving on to some of Dr. Dan Siegel's work, he looks at the 4 S's of attachment. And we can kind of think of these as like, what are the building blocks of a healthy relationship? So this is, of course, something that a teacher and different school staff can use in the classroom, but this pertains to all of life and every human relationship. So this pertains to you and your family when you have dinner later today, and it also pertains to the other adults you work with and the different people you serve. So first is seen. So let's just go back to the perspective of a child. So children who feel seen, I feel seen as my unique self, meaning I can be different and it's not a threat, nor do I feel wrong for it. My inner needs are sensed by my caregiver and reliably met. So I feel seen. The next is soothed. In moments of distress, I feel seen and comforted by you. And I'm able to then shift back into a state of regulation and balance. Your presence soothes me, comforts me, and I can go to you and know that I can shift back into regulation because of our interaction. And then as a result of that, I feel safe. So not only are you not a source of terror, but you will protect me from threat. And also, if we experience some interpersonal conflict, you will be open to repair the rupture in our relationship. So I feel safe to be my authentic self. I can come to you and be soothed when I feel distressed. And I feel safe with you, whether there's an outside threat or if we tend to have a disagreement. And the above 3 create this intermental model, which they call a schema, of feeling secure that you, my caregiver, are someone I can rely on. I can rely on the bond of our relationship if I need to come to you because of something. And then as a result, I can rely on myself. I'm someone, because I've learned through our connection and our relationship, I am someone I can rely on in my life and in my world, because you've modeled that behavior for me and you've made me feel worthy of having my needs met and also just being who I am. And so all attachment relationships implicitly ask and answer these 4 fundamental questions. Can I rely on your care? And therefore, am I worthy of care? An offshoot of that then becomes, can I rely on my care? And then projecting that out into the world. How caring is our world? And based on this, we create these implicit expectations, which of course then would put our autonomic nervous system, can I relax here, or do I need to be on alert as we interact with people and move through the world? So we're going to cover models of attachment very briefly. These are the different schemas that can be created. It's important to mention these are not personality types, although in modern conversation online, it might appear to be as such. Notice I'm not saying attachment types. I'm really sticking to the more formal models of attachment as a way to label them. So these models are learned adaptive responses for survival. This is how a child survived in their home based on the cards they were dealt, if you will, in terms of their caregivers. And it's important also to note that these are relationship specific and they're activated in situation dependent ways. So something that mammals, humans, engaged in earlier years is something called alloparenting. And that means that we were raised in more of like a village type setting. So we actually have anywhere from 3 to 5, 3 to 4 attachment figures in our life at any given moment. Or we have room for such, if you will. So that could be a mom, could be a dad. You can have a secure attachment with your mom and an avoidant attachment with your dad. We'll go into this in just a moment. You can have your uncle, you can have your neighbor, you can have your teacher, you can have your coach. So we have room for multiple attachment models to be created within us. And based on which ones feed us the most, or unfortunately traumatize us the most, that can really be our predominant model of attachment. It's also important to note that although these do form in the early years of life, they're very malleable through, let's say, even our teen years. So around 12 or so. And they're in this constant flux. And that's really when a child is up through middle school. So school itself is just an incredible opportunity to continue to shape a child's psyche and nervous system in a way where they do feel welcome in the world. They do bring their beautiful gifts to the table, and they can actually feel safe enough to get their work done, let alone build the proper regulation skills that they'll need to meet success in life later on down the road. So there's one secure, and then there's 3 secure attachment models. The secure self is a child that received consistent S's, so those 4 S's of attachment. And as a result, this child can regulate their emotions. They're able to understand and meet their own attachment needs. They can take healthy risks. So even if something's a little bit intimidating, they feel like they're capable of going after it because they have a solid support system to fall back on, both at home and in themselves. And therefore, they engage in mutually rewarding social engagement and relationships. And typically, this is actually 50 to 65% of the general population. Then moving into the non-secure, so we have avoidant, and this creates the disconnected self. So this child was not seen for who they are, and they were not soothed. And as a result, that child's like, well, why am I going to go to you, mom and or dad? You do nothing for me, so I'll just take care of it myself. But as a result of that, it's not as simple as I'm just going to ignore my parents. It's actually, I'm going to ignore and minimize my own personal attachment needs so that I don't feel the yearning and the longing, which then is very uncomfortable and causes suffering. So they disconnect from their own emotions, they disconnect from a depth of their own self-understanding, and they tend to disconnect from others to some degree. And this can be roughly 20% in the population. Then we see an ambivalent attachment model, and this creates the confused self. And this tends to occur with children that have received inconsistent S's or intrusiveness. So the parent that was a very helicopter parent, the parent that was extremely emotional, and the child's nervous system would just sponge up that dysregulated state from their parent. It would get to a point where they didn't know if they were feeling their own fear or they were feeling their mother's fear. They're like, hey, I came to you because I was hungry and now I feel terrified and incompetent. How did that happen? So they mirror the dysregulated emotions of the caretaker in their own nervous system, which then amplifies their attachment needs, and they tend to engage in imbalance social interactions, and that's about 15% of the population. And lastly, we have disorganized, which is it leads to the fragmented self. And this child actually experiences terror at the hand of their caregiver. And this creates a unique biological paradox of both running away from the threat, which the autonomic nervous system is programmed to do, but then running towards the caretaker for protection, which is what the mammalian autonomic nervous system does. But when the caretaker is both the source of threat and the caretaker, the child doesn't know what to do. And as a result, they fragment, and they tend to experience dissociation between memories and emotions, or between thoughts and actions. And in the general population, we see this between 5 and 15%, but in our most vulnerable populations and families, we can see that up to 80% in children. And so where attachment theory and polyvagal theory connect is that infants and children use the co-regulation cues of safety and threat sent by their caregiver and their autonomic nervous system to literally build their internal system neurologically, biologically, and psychologically. So they learn to regulate their physiological and emotional states. They literally facilitate the development of their brain and cognition and biochemistry, therefore modulating different gene expression based on what the environment is asking for. And then through the relationships, they learn who they are. Am I worthy of care? Can I rely on myself? Can I be who I uniquely am? And then also they learn the meaning and the rules that exist in the world that they were born into. So children create these neural pathways of experience within their own brains based on the interactions that we have with them. I'm going to move through this just so we can continue on here. And so, as I've mentioned, we have the power to buffer against the traumas that these children may experience at home by attuning to children's needs, allowing our autonomic nervous system to be regulated to the best of our own ability, and then really seeing and meeting them as the unique individuals that they are. And research has shown the power of one. Even one positive adult relationship at school or in the community can change a child's life forever and restore that connection in themselves, with others, and the world around them. So just to take a quick look at the specific outcomes in the classroom that affect a child. So we see shifts as a result of traumatic experience in academic performance. So they're not able to process oral and written language. They have difficulty reading verbal and nonverbal cues, memory and recall deficiencies. They can't quite organize things in sequential order, or A plus B equals C, or which things come first, understanding cause and effect relationships, and then also a sense of self and perspective taking, which might lead into compassion and empathy development. We also see shifts in academic performance, so shifts in executive function, like attention and focus, and also the whole process of goal setting. So setting a goal, creating a plan, executing the goal, reflecting on the goal, and then taking forward what worked and didn't work into the future. Transitions between activities or time of day throughout the school day, and different elements of mental and physical organization. And then we'll see classroom behavior shifts. And this should be more clear now, having learned a bit about the autonomic nervous system. So aggression, reactivity, impulsiveness, hyperactivity, hyperarousal, rapid and unexpected emotional shifts, perhaps even defiance, sounds more sympathetic in nature, perfectionism as well, actually, and then withdrawal, hyperarousal, spacing out, tummy aches, things like that. And then social relationships. So they're not able to trust the students or adults around them. They have difficulty reading faces and gestures. They have difficulty interpreting those verbal and nonverbal cues, lack of insight into relationships, difficult identifying and empathizing emotions, both in themselves and others, and decreased motivation, both to perform in school and also relate to others, and then can tend to lead to that isolation and avoidance, or this attach and cry for help. We can see, again, the fawning, the sympathetic, the shutdown, what have you. So what can we do as a community? So this has been a really wonderful program developed in West Virginia, and it's called Handle with Care. And Handle with Care is a community trauma-sensitive response to support children exposed to trauma and violence through improved communication and collaboration between law enforcement, schools, child agencies, and mental health providers. And identified children can receive appropriate interventions so that they can succeed in school to the best of their ability. This was first developed in 2012. In West Virginia, and piloted in 2013, and in 2021, it was present in over 40 states throughout the country. So we certainly covered the problem. I'm going to move right along. And this slide was really great from Selena up in Hayward Hospital. This was just different ways that misunderstandings occur when we don't have handle and care with place, when we don't have a trauma-informed perspective. And so the student could be staring off into space. They forgot to study for their test, or they couldn't because they were afraid all night at home. They're tired, they're hungry, their stomach hurts, they're short-tempered or acting out. And without this awareness, teachers and staff can have the response of, pay attention, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you study? Stay awake in class, no snacking allowed, or detention or different punitive measures for bad behaviors and forced separation from classmates. Furthermore, adults can misinterpret traumatic symptoms as willful negative behaviors and unintentionally distance themselves from students, thinking that that relationship might be hopeless and they just don't pursue anymore. They can misperceive students as lazy and also, again, impose those punitive responses. And as a result, that certainly is not going to help the child feel any safer and therefore engage any further in school. So there's decreased motivation and engagement in learning. As a result, poor grades, poor relationships, truancy and dropping out, suspension and expulsion. Ultimately, possibly involvement in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system down the road. And because we come from the DA's office, I just wanted to take a moment to look over this. This is a mental health court study that looked at 311 participants, and they surveyed them to ask about different adverse childhood experiences. And these kids who ended up in the court system eventually had a tremendous trauma history. And so you can see that 70% of women and 25% of men were sexually abused or raped before the age of 20. 61% of women or 68% of men, their parents beat them with a belt. 39% of women, 28%, their father figure was arrested. 33% of women, 25% of men, they only lived with their biological father till age of 15 or longer. So we can see that there's a huge population of people that we end up seeing in our criminal justice system that have trauma histories. And this next clip, which is just 2 minutes long, shows something called the Compassion Prison Project, where her name is Fitzy Horman, went into a mass security prison in California, and she did an exercise called the Compassion Trauma Circle. Again, this just shows just how prevalent trauma is in general, but also among our criminal justice system populations.
Sue, we can't hear that if there's supposed to be sound on it. I think it's a setting you had to
Yeah.
show your screen sound.
Okay, I will move right along then, because I hid my control panel and now I can't seem to get it back to share sound. Okay. So a solution, as was stated, is cross-agency communication, and we have this great initiative called Handle with Care. And the way that it works is, should a first responder, law enforcement, be called to a scene where a child is present, that child would then send a Handle with Care notice to the school so that they receive it prior to the start of the next school day, including just the child's name, age, and school, and just 3 words, Handle with Care. So it does not violate confidentiality, and it's only disseminated on a need-to-know basis. So only the point person, perhaps the school nurse, and the teachers that actually interact with that student. When to send a Handle with Care notice? So when a child is a victim of or is exposed to crime, violence, abuse, or even a medical emergency, if someone had a heart attack in the home, if there was a car accident, if a pet died. I mean, we're not here to judge what is or is not traumatic for a child. This does not replace a 51A. So similar to a 51A, when in doubt, file. A Handle with Care notice is, when in doubt, send. And it's to send one on every child, even if the child is out of district and in this place visiting. So how the Handle with Care structure is set up in your area is unique to your locality, but different ways that Handle with Care notices have been sent by law enforcement and first responders to the school can be a number of different ways. Give me one moment. So it can be encrypted email, it could be a dispatcher call, a paper notice, which was how this originated. It could be a custom app, encrypted text message, could even be a unique QR code that opens up a form and sends to an encrypted Excel sheet to the point person involved. Here's a brief example of the QR notification system. So the officer would have different schools, or if there's only one school in their area, this QR code would then bring up this notification form. They would put in the name, age, school attending of the child, perhaps their own name and tracking number for reference. And then when they submitted that, it would go into a Handle with Care tracking sheet that was, again, only disseminated and access to on a need-to-know basis to protect the confidentiality of the child. And if it isn't obvious by now, the importance of trauma-sensitive schools and agencies cannot be stressed enough. These schools provide opportunities for children to really forge relationships with caring adults and peers and learn in a supportive and predictable, safe environment in order to buffer the effects of any traumas they might experience in their lives. And these respectful, safe environments where they can learn help them to manage their emotions, behavioral responses, and academic success, building the skills they need to navigate life and avoid any interaction with the criminal justice system down the road. This is just a lovely map to show where in the country Handle with Care is currently either there's interest, which is yellow, in the development phase, which is purple, or active in blue. And in some states, we can see it's fully implemented across the whole state. So I am going to hold off on questions, and I'm going to pass along the mic now to our colleagues up in Gardner who have implemented the Handle with Care program, and they can discuss their journey with what it's like on the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Selena Johnson. I am the Director of Community Investment with Haywood Healthcare, and I have been connected with some form of Handle with Care since our initiation, before we even knew what the term Handle with Care was. I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of give an overview on where we were, how we got to where we are, who our partners are. And I will also be pinch hitting for our law enforcement officers. They were on our call earlier. They are part of an active shooting training today and could not stay long enough to present on their slides. So I will do my best to honor their words. And then I'll hand it over to Renee Eldredge, who is the current Handle with Care program manager, and she will kind of wrap up where we are and where we're going. So hopefully it's a nice little synopsis for you, and we can open up to questions and everything at the end. I'm going to see, here we go. I don't drive very well on some things, so I apologize. All right, so Handle with Care, North Quabbin and North Central Massachusetts. Oh no, it's going without me. Okay, sorry about that, technical issues. All right. This is a really high level overview for us, and I'll kind of speak to some of the different pieces. And actually, how did you hide your screen? Because that is strangely in the way, huh? I'll do my best to read around it. So on the left-hand side, the light blue gives a high-level overview of where we started. Prior to 2018, we were actually working on a grant to look at addressing behavioral health care a little differently in our region. And Haywood is a partner with a lot of community organizations. We come from a region that does not get a lot of funding. We have to figure out different ways to collaborate and support each other. And as part of the discussion around behavioral health and issues and concerns, we knew there was a lot of need for youth programming. And one of our partners at that time was the Gardner School Systems. We were looking very local, very strategic, and I believe we have Superintendent Pellegrino on the call today, so please feel free to jump in and say something at any point in time, Mark. So we worked with the school systems on, identifying behavioral health needs for students and helping them, access care, remove barriers, support youth so that they were able to, be seen in school, get the behavioral health supports that they need, which allows them to increase attendance at school, better academic outcomes, and obviously less behaviors in the classroom. So everything that Sue kind of talked about earlier of those action items that we see in the classroom, we were able to help kind of address and mitigate a little bit at that time. But as part of that grant, we had the Regional Behavioral Health Collaborative. And this was a large group of people from the community. We had parents, we had caregivers, we also had professional staff that were law enforcement, from the schools, from other programs, from the justice, the criminal courts. So we had every capacity that you could think of a connection in our region that might be impacted by behavioral health. And one of the things we really looked at was the high levels of neglect and abuse in our region, and specific again to youth. And we started to challenge ourselves to say, what can we do as a collaborative, as a local group of people that care? How can we invest into our youth so that they're supported and can receive services that they need? And one of our members at that time did a lot of research on what is going on nationally, what can be done, how are groups taking on this on this initiative. And we found Ed Jacobs, who's actually, I believe, on the call also down in Plymouth area, who his team was working on a Handle with Care project. And it really resonated with a lot of what we were looking to do in our communities, which was to support youth, but to also work with our adults, you know, the people that are around youth every day, on how we might impact and how we could support change in our kids. So we, in 2018, we reached out, you know, we found out that, you know, access to behavioral health for youth in our region is struggling. What can we do? We got all sorts of information. And in 2019, we were awarded a grant from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office called Trauma-Informed Care for Young Children. And this grant specifically looked at the development of a project or program similar to Handle with Care. And that's where we kind of went under the wing of Ed Jacobs and his team and some of the other community partners that do training on ACEs and on trauma-informed care services. And we worked with our larger collaborative on what are these items, and we did a lot of training, and we focused on one school department as our primary group. So we worked with Gardner Public Schools. We again focused the work there, but when we did our trainings, they were globally. They were across our initiative. They were not just for Gardner staffing. It was for everyone, because our intent was, let's look to see what we can do, figure out how to do it and how to work together, and then look at rolling it out a little further so that we can have this service, this program, you know, more regionally. So we hosted multiple sessions, wholly, and then some very, very specific to the school systems and the police departments. Training, learning, and improvements are continuous. They're all the time with us. We function now on a quarterly basis as a collaborative, but in the beginning we met monthly. We looked at what's working, what's not working, how can we communicate, what are our barriers, you know, what other trainings need to be engaged, how do we want to work as a system. So there's a lot of discussions, a lot of planning, and we now we're meeting on quarterly basis. We're a little bit more formal now, but we still have team huddles that happen between specific schools and police departments that are monthly, again, focused on very specific engagement wins and concerns. And as always, there's those side discussions that are essential to having a functioning program where you have your key people and collaborators working and naturally communicating with each other as needed. And then we also have a newsletter that goes out, I want to say quarterly also now, that's used to kind of link everyone again in between our meetings on what's going on, you know, great things that we're hearing are happening in different systems, and then, you know, what trainings are coming up. So again, we were initiated in Gardner, but it was so that we could really look at how we could do this universally across all of our partners. We tracked totals so we could actually see impact on student behavior and how things were functioning, and we shared those out, really got interest from our partners. And once we kind of got a nice flow going, it was a natural progression that another department and law enforcement agency and school department wanted to become a part of the process. So each sector kind of self-identified when they were ready to join in, and we now have, I think, 10 police departments and 6 school districts that participate regionally. And usually what we saw from our early studies is that it was much more centrally located, one police department, one school system in one small community, and had that working in that sense, which is really how a lot of it works and is initiated. But our region is very mobile. We have students that live several towns away and may be going to school in different areas, or living with a grandparent at one point, and then, you know, having a sibling in a different school district. So they're traveling. And then also, you know, you just get in a car accident and you're not in your own hometown. And so it's not the police department from your hometown that's identifying you. How do you still engage in kind of this flagging and awareness, so that the information is, you know, again, identified by the responding officer, like Sue said, and then entered into a system that notifies directly to the school, usually before the student returns to school the next day. That way they're able to kick into trauma-informed, sensitive school protocols. Each school system, I don't really know, I want to see what my next slide is because I feel like I might be babbling past it. So each school system has a little bit of a unique process, but we do kind of have a flow on how information happens. And we work with each school system and each law enforcement agency on engagement in trainings and how can we work together. And we help identify flows so that the schools that, you know, they have their own culture, they want to make sure it fits in their style and are able to, you know, have something that works in their system. This is a quick overview. Oh no, I'm going again. I thought I was good. I apologize. Of our initiator. So we have Mark Pellegrino and we have Deputy Chief. Sorry, names are blocking me. So I'm nervous. So my system's going really high right now. So I'm not connecting in my brain. So I apologize. But our first school year was 2019, 2020. And again, it was very specific to Gardner. We were just learning and we worked with 80 students and we thought that was amazing. On the flip side, it was really empowering and saddening to know that we identified 80 students, right, that obviously had traumatic experience outside the classroom that we were not aware of beforehand. I don't know why I have a timing on this. I apologize. So each year we've added a little bit more in-depth outreach and strategy and increased our numbers. 2021, 22, we added more school districts. Last year, we had most all school districts partnering. We had 360 handle with care notices shared that year. So cumulatively, we're about 450, which is amazing for, if you think of it, we went through the COVID era of not really working together too. So, you know, keeping up the interest, keeping up the awareness that, you know, trauma will always happen and we need to figure out a way to support these youth so that they can better connect to what their jobs are, to be kids, to grow up, to, you know, go to school and have a healthy life. So between 2021 and 2023, we saw over 600 youth, and it's growing. The more students, the more school systems that we have engaged, the more streamlined the processing, the easier it is for our law enforcement officers to participate. All the trainings we do, it's continual and it keeps deepening. This is a snapshot of a couple of our school districts. In our newsletter, we like to highlight one each month. We have our Marhar, we have Narragansett, Ashburnham, Westminster. Again, these are just 3 of our partner highlights. You'll see some of our officers in them. And it's exciting because we do have active school participation from about 6 school districts. We're now expanding to some of the private schools that exist in our towns because they're not necessarily in the local school purview. Our partnership is here also. You'll see that it's beyond just schools and police departments. We do work with the Boys and Girls Club. We're trying to figure out a way to, you know, do stuff over the summer to keep something a little bit more systemic. We're looking at trainings through mock and early childhood. So it's really a great expansion. And as noted earlier, we do provide, Haywood has behavioral health services on site at many of our school departments and many of our school systems. So we have on-site counselors when or if needed and identified by school staff. We're able to step up and do more interventions with them as needed. I have no control over this. I am so sorry. It's telling me to hurry up, so I will. So it's just a great review on, you know, who's here, and what's missing is we probably have about 800 people on our newsletter, and they're from all over the area. And they, we have people that come in and do trainings and, you know, really work with us on how to continue with our trauma sensitive awareness, and why that is important. I think one of the key things we've learned is, sure, we have to learn how to communicate with each other, right? So the police system has to figure out their style. The school system has to figure out their style. There needs to be a conduit that goes between the two. But then we also have to, you know, understand how we engage students and how we can change their lives on a daily basis. And we get stuck in our work all the time. We have certain things we have to do, and that's our goal. And sometimes we come off a little difficult and we might not mean to be, but the reality is our presence impacts youth, and we have to keep that awareness as to what our responsibility is and why it's important. And I think that training, though, is so obvious. We're all in this because we believe it, but it's so important to keep at the forefront, because our officers get overwhelmed and they're overworked. Our school staff is overwhelmed and overworked. So it's that, just that continual awareness of, you're important. These people are important, and they're there to help our youth. And it's just a continual thing. So if there's one thing I can leave everyone with, is it will always be a training piece, no matter what. So we're growing. We welcome people to join our partnership all the time, learn about us, and hopefully see what there is that you can bring to your realm. I'm going to jump into the law enforcement side a little bit. So law enforcement began in the Gardner area about 2018, 2019. And as Sue mentioned earlier, it was a paper form. It really was written out by the policeman, law enforcement officer, and handed over, and expected that the youth or the family member would bring it to school the next day. So that was like one of the initial things. Then it grew into the officer would track it as he or she's experiencing engagement with the community, and a youth was there, and they would compile a list, and at the end of their shift they would turn it into a point person there who would take all of that information, put it into a database, and then purposefully do the submission to each school. That took a lot of time. It had multiple steps. It required blank forms to be on hand for the officers on site to really take the time to fill them out, review them, make sure they're all detailed properly, and then another person to enter everything, and another person to, so you get the example. It was a lot of extra work. So it didn't take long before the Gardner PD came back and said, is there a way we can maybe do something a little bit more streamlined? And so as a collaborative, we talked about it. You know, what are the steps? What are the processes? What are the barriers? And we thought, why don't we try to go paperless and go as automated as possible? So we looked into it, and a lot of different groups are doing it. So we're not recreating the wheel, but we're definitely getting in line with people. And we have a wonderful person at the Gardner PD who created the QR code. And it was exactly like what Sue showed you. It's that QR code, they scan it on their phone, it goes to a Google form. It's very, very basic to fill out. So it takes no time at all at the scene. We have it so that our officers are able to ask which school the student actually goes to. I don't know about your other schools, but some of us have 2 elementary schools and a shared middle school, or they're regional schools. So just because they're from town doesn't mean they all go to the same location. So we can identify which exact school it goes to, and then it's filtered into the back of that Google form, which is the Excel that Sue mentioned. And it's automatic from there. That database is set up to send a blind notice just with the student's name and handle with care to the point person at school. And that happens seamlessly. As soon as they hit enter, it goes to the school. So now we've lessened time, we've smoothed the process, and it really helps to, I think, lessen the amount of steps and work that is on the PD end, because let's face it, they have a lot on their plate at that moment in time. So wonderful. We have this process going, and now we are like, okay, that was great. Now we have 50 QR codes on this big sheet that has different schools on it, because each one is dedicated and unique for each school location. So wouldn't it be great if we just had one QR code with a couple drop downs on where those schools are, right? To me, that sounds really simple. It's not. But that's our next step, is to create a universal QR code that all of our cruisers just have that one code. They do the simple scan, and we're able to go from there exactly how we always have been, and really making it a much more smooth process. So that's really what they're asking for, is, how can we further streamline it? How can we get the code to work for us all? And when is it going to be ready? Which is wonderful, because it shows interest, it shows commitment, it shows that there's stability and continuing with keeping the program going. So as Officer Spain and our lieutenant continue developing the program, they're also creating how-to videos, because it's also important so our staff that's engaged on both sides have a strong understanding of how to access their data, how to track their numbers, because we do collect them as a collaborative monthly also. And it's really to look at, what is our overall impact in our region? And how can that drive change in other areas? And how can we apply for funding to then maybe bring in other programs? Or how can we work without funding, because that's what we're really used to as a region, to impact change in other areas? And what are we seeing? So we're using our data, which is really high level numbers. We don't have a lot of, we don't track a lot of like actual detail in anything, but we're still able to use that to help guide and inform a lot of our decisions going forward as a region. I feel like I'm flying way too fast. Am I going too fast? I'm okay. All right. All right. I can't see this one, so I'm assuming it's the ED one, and I'm going to hand it over to Renee.
Thank you so much, Selena. My name is Renee Eldredge. I am the Assistant Program Manager for the Handle with Care initiative. And prior to my role with Haywood in this position, I did work and was honored to be working as the school-based care coordinator within the Gardner school systems, and was the initial point person for the Handle with Care initiative in the school district there. So I want to be mindful to time, and I'm going to go pretty quickly, but I want to just share this new initiative that started through Haywood's Athol and Gardner emergency room locations. As we speak to the law enforcement as our first responders, Haywood Hospital spent many months talking with administration on how can we bring in the first responders in our emergency departments. And so the initiative itself, thank you. The initiative itself, as it reads here, is to support trauma-informed care with the use of a caregiver self-referral tool by informing the schools, the youth's daycare and or primary care physicians, so that, again, trauma responsive care is provided for the youth, that there's an awareness that an incident at the emergency department has happened. There is no confidential information given, as are the QR code notifications with the law enforcement. It's strictly a caregiver form if accepted when they register a youth between 3 years old and 18 years old, would provide the caregiver the opportunity to send that to the school nurse. And so therefore it's not worrying about any compliance issues with HIPAA or FERPA. This is something that the parent or caregiver is willingly providing to the school, again, daycare or primary care physician, in regards to that there was a visit. And so the discussions that were had with hospital administration was that the trauma of being in the ED in of itself is why we're initiating this phase 1. And so no one needs to know why they were there specifically, as they do not know what the law enforcement Handle with Care notification is about either. And so why are we doing this? Well, we're looking to mitigate negative effects that are experienced by the youth as a result of being exposed to a traumatic event. And what we're able to track right now in this first phase that we're calling it is the number of youth that are seen and the number of caregiver referral forms that are being accepted. And what we'd like to do is close that loop, and we're working to build a data collection, the analytics between the school so that we collect that on a monthly basis and have an understanding of how many are being received within those districts that are in our collaborative. So we don't have any control over where else those might go. But the exciting news is that we actually just recently heard from Mount Wachusett Community College that there was one received there. So the outreach is happening. It's exciting to learn that youth are being provided this trauma responsive care. As this next slide shows, March through August, again, we started in March. We have, I say we, over 1,500 youth have been identified in the emergency rooms, Athol and Gardner locations during registration process. 800 plus of the caregivers have decided to take that self-referral form and consider using that for their youth. And on average, what we're seeing and able to track is that 9% on average of the youth are being identified with a behavioral health or substance use disorder need. I'm just going to pause there for a second. So it's 9% with a behavioral health or substance use disorder need. And what we want to do in our future phases is work to build the initiative so that we are able to then make a connection with the telebehavioral health services that Selena alluded to that we have in 5 of those 6 school districts right now. So that's our goal and that's our hope to work towards those future phases. As Selena mentioned, we work with 6 school districts, including CAPS Collaborative, 2 locations, and a private parochial elementary school right now. This is amazing work. Quickly, what you're seeing here is Trauma Informs, just a couple of resources. The Barking Dog and Wise Owl. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I saw that for the first time. There's a link there. Please take 5 minutes or 4 minutes to watch this. It's amazing. It's a clinician that explains how the brain works, and this is for use with youth. It's amazing. How much time? Okay, I want to take just 2 more minutes. Okay, Sue? I want to share that. So proud to work with one of our interns over the summer. He's from Bowdoin University, and she developed a presentation on ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, specifically for youth. So this is something that the schools, that organizations like Clinical Support and Options that have a family resource center can provide for youth so that the youth are understanding what these adverse experiences are so that they can process that there is tentative concern around having experienced some of these traumas, and that connectivity is important. So it alludes to what Sue did, and both of these presentations here are connected to a mini neuroscience presentation for youth. And Liesl Allen is the intern that worked with us, a senior who majors in neuroscience and education. And she actually got to present to the Gardner mayor, as well as Representative State Zlotnick and many other organizations. So we're really proud to have her on board. She developed these. Please visit our website if you're looking for some additional information. And Sue also showed a map of all of the other states that are participating with Handle with Care. That information below, Lisa Carmelia, she is with the West Virginia Handle with Care, and she actually holds what's called a base camp for statewide collaborative members that share information. It's amazing. So if you're interested in learning more about it, that's really a great place to start. Tons of information in there. And I think we covered everything.
Beautiful. Thank you, Renee. I feel like we went really fast in talking how our collaborative kind of got together or how we work together. I'm more than happy to talk in more detail on the side. If anyone's ever interested, definitely reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, I'm Mark, I'm the superintendent of Gardner Public Schools. I just wanted to, just do a quick shout out to Selena and Renee. They've done a lot of work around this, and the Handle with Care program for us has been phenomenal. We have a very robust MTSS process, and this fits very nicely right in that process. I think it's easy to incorporate with any school district. So I really appreciate their hard work, and it took a while to get to where we are, but it seems like I actually still get the notices when someone, when we're notified about a student. So I think it's great that the right people, it goes right to the right people, and the teachers love knowing that who's been identified, because it just helps them in their daily practices. So that's all I wanted to say, but thanks a lot to everybody who participates in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was so beautiful and brilliant, and so much good information. I think people might have put some questions. Sue, I think you had a question in the chat. If you wanted to hop on and ask that, you could. Certainly there were plenty of comments about just how impressed people are with the reach of this intervention, the comprehensive understanding of trauma. It's just super thrilling to even see that it exists. We know that one of the biggest things that happens in trauma is one bad thing leads to another bad thing, to another bad thing, to another bad thing. And if we're able to stop that and get people the help they need, it's just incredible, so inspiring. And we're just so grateful that you all work together to come on board today and share this with us. And the fact that you're doing it, I'm sure it has such a huge impact that we can't even see the amount of impact it has in the moment, because this is really primary prevention work, and it's beautiful. So thank you. Anyone who has a question, feel free to jump on in. We do have a couple minutes left. You all went fast, but did perfect on time. We used every moment effectively. Well done.
I can jump in real quick to talk about intervention. So Handle with Care itself technically isn't a program beyond doing that notification, right? So the schools then are trained on trauma-informed care protocols and applications, and the school kicks into whatever their normal role of youth awareness and behavior interventions would be. They're just a little heightened around that one individual. They do not engage with the person. That's not part of what Handle with Care is. So again, Handle with Care is just that identification, notification, heads up that something might be a little different with this youth, give them a little bit of awareness, but it also then shifts the staff at the school into trauma-informed care protocols. So really every youth at that school then benefits from having an educator working at a higher level. So it's at that point then that the school would identify a need to do an intervention, in which case many of the school systems that we're connected to have teleyouth, telebehavioral health, as well as telemedical on site. So we're able to address and support a lot of them as needed, or we can refer out. The schools can support their youth in those ways too. I hope I answered your questions.
Thank you, Selena. I had a question for Sue. Amazing job, everyone. And yeah, just amazing. What I was thinking of, Sue, when you were presenting is, where are we nationally or even locally in terms of, what's the next frontier with this information? Because as soon as you started describing things like, people, victims, forgetting details, every single day I hear about a defense attorney that says, well, see, she got her story wrong, so therefore she's not a credible witness for herself in a DV situation. So I'm wondering, like, when are we going to see the tide changing? Is it a policy? Is it a training issues? But we know this stuff is happening right now, despite all the wonderful efforts of DA Early and other folks that are committed to this. We hear this every day, that people who have been traumatized, their testimony is completely discounted because they don't make good witnesses.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I saw your comment in the chat of this should be a required training for judges, attorneys, police, etc. And I couldn't agree more. Obviously we're child focused within the Handle with Care initiative, but that of course includes first responders. And our office, certain people, including myself and Ellen in our office, are trained in the SAMHSA training of how being trauma informed improves the criminal justice system. So there are absolutely efforts to continue bringing this up the chain of command, and just really spreading trauma informed care and responsiveness throughout really all systemic systems that I think we have in place now. It will only improve literally the world we live in. And some of these kids that we are efforting to support now still may fall through the cracks and wind up in the criminal justice system. And hopefully at that point, we can have, like you said, the personnel within that structure at least aware of what trauma is and how it can affect something like, giving a report as a witness. So there are massive shifts in all areas I'm seeing in our country, really. And so it feels like a very exciting and hopeful time to be alive. And I know that that's something that I'll be doing in-house at the DA's office as well, in terms of offering this presentation to my colleagues and coworkers.
Can I just jump in real quick? There was also a question in regards to the ACEs youth presentation. So Worcester Acts kindly lists links to all of their presentations. And so this one is in there. In the actual link, if you click in there, you will find the ACEs youth presentations. There are 2 of them, and it also comes with an activity, as well as the Handle with Care website, and also for West Virginia. So there's links inside of that. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that.
And if there's any others you want us to add, we're happy to do that. It's great to have a place where people can find all these resources, because they were incredible resources. Thank you so much. Well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we are at 2:03. So thanks again for people for even sticking around. So great, so helpful. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being here. Even if you aren't a kid or working with kids, I'm sure you could take some valuable information from this presentation. Excellent job. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next month for Trauma Training Tuesday. Take good care. Thanks, Sue. DA Early's office, you guys rocked it. Thank you. Bye. Incredible.